All right, it's 3 o'clock. Let's call the meeting to order. If everybody can put their phones on silent, please. Paula, would you like to take roll?
Matt Guillory.
Here.
Jorge Charnico.
Here.
Dylan Bradway. Betsy Brunstetter. Donna Cervantes.
Here.
Tyler Holmes.
Here.
Lee Peoples.
Here, and I'll be leaving at 3:50.
Ben Sellers.
Here.
James Farnham.
Here.
You have a quorum.
All right, thank you. You all have copies of the minutes from the January meeting, and have had a chance to go over them. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Okay, the minutes from the January 25th meeting are approved. Sorry. We have no cases withdrawn, no continuance requests, and no consent docket. We basically have one case in other business, carried over from last month, I believe. It uses two different addresses, 319 Northwest 23rd or 323 Northwest 23rd, SPUD 00560. Michael?
Yeah, let me clarify the confusion on the address. The primary address is 323. It's the address for the property at the corner. However, the site does include and would involve the demolition of a building at 319. So, this item was continued from the meeting you had in January at the request of the applicant. Since we saw it first, the applicant has made some significant changes to the design of the building as well as the site plan. And I did want to point out at the outset that this hearing is for the Commission to consider the option of whether or not the SPUD should be amended to allow the drive cut on Northwest 23rd. Presently, the SPUD that was approved in 2010 does not allow or did not specifically mention or show a driveway cut on 23rd. It specifically mentioned two other access points, one on Northwest 24th and one from the alley. So that is the significant change that is before the Commission today. While you do have a site plan for the proposed development of the project, should the SPUD be approved to allow that drive cut, that site plan should not be the focus of our discussion today. That would come back to you as a separate CA, assuming that the SPUD gets approved to allow it in this configuration. So don't want to get too hung up on the details of the site plan because that'll occur at a separate hearing at a later date.
Right,
So,
and then the building architecture we'll hear about in the presentation. So if you have detailed questions about the building architecture, save that for item 8.
Okay, and that's the presentation that we're talking about under communications.
That's correct.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So we've prepared a staff report for you that goes into quite a lot of detail with respect to the proposed change to introduce this driveway cut on Northwest 23rd. To be clear, there is already a driveway cut on the Northwest 23rd side of the site that provides access to a surface parking lot that exists on the site today. However, the proposal involves the closure of that existing drive cut and moving it approximately 16, 17 feet east to line up with the proposed drive-through aisle that would be proposed in the CA that would be coming before you later. We've spent a lot of time in the staff report discussing the street wall and pedestrian safety and pedestrian ambiance along this section of the road. And we feel it's an important subject, and that's why the report sounds maybe a little bit repetitive. We've had a hitting on it quite a few times. And that's really because we feel it's an important issue, and it's within the context of the existing block that we're dealing with here. And it's not just limited to this block on the north side of 23rd Street. If you start at this block and go west, there's probably, I think there's 2, maybe 3 more blocks in addition to this that have a largely intact street wall. And we feel that's an important facet, important component to be conducive to the pedestrian ambiance and pedestrian-friendly nature of the street. So we've kind of made a case along those lines. We did indicate towards the end of the report, or the discussion in the report, that the applicant has made some significant changes to the plan, such as it was when we first saw it. And those 2 changes consist of basically moving the proposed building so that it gets closer to the existing building that would remain after the demolition at 319, so that the gap in the street wall is narrowed from, I think it was something close to 40 feet, where it's now something more along the lines of 20 to 22 feet. And secondarily, where that gap occurs, they've built a false front facade that links the proposed and the existing, that would link the proposed and the existing building and give it at least somewhat a semblance of appearance of a continuous street wall. Although you would be driving through that wall to access the drive-through window at the rear of the building. So we've made a recommendation to the commission that the change to the SPUD be approved, or a recommendation to the Planning Commission of approval, and we're prepared to respond to any questions the commission may have.
Michael, can you address the actual demolition that's being proposed for 319? I read the original SPUD from 2010, and I do not see anything about the demolition of that building in the original SPUD.
Yeah, that site plan that we had is the only one that was available to us, and it's kind of hard to read, but the original SPUD in 2010 did also anticipate the demolition of the building at 319. You can see it here in the upper right corner slide. You have that existing building that's out there with the large green metal awning on it, and 319 consists of this, I don't know, it's probably about a 25-foot wide space at the west end of the existing building that would be removed. And this is, as we mentioned in the staff report, the area in the proposed site plan that would be replaced with a sidewalk along the western side of the remaining portion of the building, and then adjacent to that sidewalk would be the proposed driveway cut on 23rd Street that would go towards the rear of the proposed buildings and service the drive-through window.
Can you pull up the site plan from the 2010 SPUD? Is that something you have on your...
This is it, and this portion right here is where 319 exists today. You can see it was being removed to have some parking in the back, and the proposed building at that time was going to connect with the remaining building.
So, in the 5 written pages of the original SPUD in 2010, there was no mention of demolition whatsoever. The only mention of it is in this visual representation here in the site plan?
Yes.
Okay. It indicates, the staff report indicates that in 2010, the UDC and the HP Commission both recommended approval of the SPUD.
Yes.
Do we know at all whether or not demolition was discussed, especially at the HP?
I'm not sure that I know the answer to that.
Okay. Okay. Other questions?
I have a question about the driveway. It seemed like that was the main concern. We're supposed to consider the amendment adding that driveway off of 23rd.
Correct.
But on page 3 of the 2010 SPUD agreement, the paragraph 9 on access.
Yeah.
Can you address that? It says that the part that's underlined, was that added or was that original?
Sorry, the question is what?
The portion that's underlined in section 9 of the original SPUD, paragraph 9.
That's the change that's being requested now.
Okay, so that is not part of the original.
No.
Okay. So that's the concern, adding the third driveway.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I was confused as to what was, so the things that are underlined are added, or?
Right.
That also applies to page 4 of the...
That's correct.
SPUD? Okay. Donna, thank you for that question. I wasn't clear on that either. Do we have anybody here that would like to speak to this?
Good afternoon, Tim Johnson with Johnson Associates here on behalf of the applicant. We were not the original preparers of the SPUD for this tract, but we did prepare the amendment that the Development Center, almost said planning, that the Development Center staff has reviewed and recommended approval. As Michael has pointed out, the originally approved SPUD was really kind of silent on the existing drive on 23rd Street. It talked about the entrances off the alley and off of 24th Street. And as Michael indicated, we are proposing to shift the alley further, shift the driveway further to the east to get better separation from the intersection, as well as create a contiguous building facade from the corner, and then with the false front drive entry that kind of fills in the toothless look on that block. So that was something that we worked, once we got involved, we worked with the developer and the architect who's here, Will Sones is here, to accomplish that. We do have a drive-through user on the corner, and we have looked at the impact of the driving lane versus the impact on 23rd Street with regard to traffic, looking at the peaks of both, the peak on 23rd versus the peak of the drive-through user. And because this is a one-way in, no exit driveway, the impact on the 23rd Street traffic is negligible. As the staff has pointed out, it does create a concern about pedestrian interruption on 23rd. However, but this is not unusual for this stretch of 23rd, especially on the south side of the street where we have probably 3 times the interruptions than the north block. And this is, again, not unlike what was approved over on the Rise, which is a block to the west. Similar in nature, it's a one-way driveway. Their driveway is wider. They've got these architectural features, the balls that protect the building, but they also have parking, but no facade. We will have a facade that will be a drive-through under with a pedestrian access way against the existing building that will close that down much tighter than what was approved for the Arise. Plus, we're narrowing the driveway down to ensure that it's only a one-way in. All access through that drive will go north. All exits from the project will go west to Hudson or north to 24th Street, then to Hudson or east. So although we respect the comments that the staff has made with regard to the pedestrian interruption, you can see the north side of the block, and it's a little dark in here. So here's the Rise, here's that one-way entrance in, which is much wider than what we're proposing. Tower Theater, Alleyway Drive, this is our proposed project, and then another parking lot over on the east end of the same block. So on the south side, obviously, there's a lot more interruptions in the walking path, but there's also a lot more parking adjacent to 23rd in that location. So our proposal is not creating something unique in that area. It's something that exists in that area, and I think by making it one-way in, it minimizes the impact. Plus, our staging lane is 2 cars longer than what code requires, so that allows for a bigger stacking above and beyond the code requirement. We're going to get into discussion on the actual site here, just as introduction to you guys, and as staff has pointed out, we're really only here to talk about our project. But so here's the existing drive. It's much closer to the intersection. It's a parking lot today. Obviously, the improvements are great for the area. It completes a block, and with the false wall, with only the opening, and we'll show you the elevation on that when we get into that. It narrows this down to a one-way drive in, with the return on the west side of the drive being very small so that nobody thinks they can go out that driveway. But it'll be directed, and we're also proposing some signage about not blocking the sidewalk and things like that, which I know you guys can't dictate that, but that's what we're proposing. With regard to the site as it exists, the red circle shows our new proposed drive. You can see how narrow it is. Here's the existing drive. We're shaving off about 10 foot of that drive and moving it about 25 feet to the east, which gets it further away from the intersection. But as a one-way drive on a street that is basically one-way, because you have a median, there's no traffic delays anticipated to harm the traffic movement on 23rd, which is, those of you that travel it like I do, it's a very calm street because of the median, because of the driveways, because of the sidewalks, because of the closeness of the buildings to the street. So you have traffic calming that's in place. Us adding this building pushed up as close to the right-of-way as we can is just going to add to that calmness. The other drives that were on the project is these two. Both are being removed. The alley will be used as access, and then 24th Street Drive will be used as access. So this is the current site plan. I have a few comments relative to the staff report, but I don't want to dwell on too many of them and give you guys a chance to talk to us. But as the staff has pointed out, really what's before you today is the addition of the use of the existing drive off of 23rd Street to utilize to service this site, creating a one-way north drive-through drive, as well as a pedestrian pathway that will serve the rear portion of the remaining building. That'll be to our east. They're going to create some openings over there, allowing that business to utilize the dumpster that we're installing behind screening. It just makes a better situation for both buildings to allow for, or the new building and the existing building to allow for a mid-building entranceway served by sidewalk. As I mentioned, we did talk about the impact of the traffic, and the peaks for this user should not complicate any pedestrian access there because it is off-peak. They are slightly off-peak. They're about an hour behind normal peak driving time. Their peak is at about 9 o'clock. I think that covers it. I think we also are proposing a do not block sidewalk sign on the entryway. That'll be included in our building plans when we submit them. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. We came late to this project. I think the owner and the architect have listened to what we felt was needed to help close this gap. And the design of the elevation of the building, which we'll show here in a minute, I think is very becoming of closing this a very open corner right now.
I would just want to comment that I think the revisions are very good improvement over what was last week. Moving this driveway and narrowing it will make this intersection much safer. I've almost had several wrecks there myself trying to come out of that current driveway. And the one-way in is a good change, and also eliminating the driveways off of Hudson there also, I think, greatly improved safety. No one else has any comments. I'll go ahead and make a motion.
Well, let's see if there's anybody. We're not ready for a motion quite yet, I don't believe. Let's see if there's anybody else from the audience that has anything else to say. And there's several people here, and this is the only thing on our docket, so,
These are the part of the applicant.
okay. Nobody else?
Could I add something? I would love to see this as a taller structure, like a two-story structure. It seems like your PUD would allow for that.
We're going to introduce that to you all after this as just an introductory item, so I'd love to hear your
Okay.
comments relative to that.
You mentioned signage in terms of not blocking the sidewalk with vehicles. Talk about what signage you'll have for that drive-through entrance. It seems to be roughly 60 to 75 feet away from the door of the establishment that it'll be serving. So it doesn't seem like it'll be totally obvious to the public where they should be turning in. What's your signage?
You want to address that first regarding signage? We're going to talk about the next presentation, but
It's a different topic.
we want to make sure that the signage is adequate for and tastefully done with reference to the building facade, so that the drive-through traffic can see that before they make an action and not block the sidewalk when pedestrians are trying to cross, or force a pedestrian to go around a car.
Okay. Anybody?
I just want to clarify again the third driveway. So in the original SPUD, it was shown, or it wasn't shown, that the original site plan attached,
It was not shown.
so, but it existed. It was on the ground?
Correct. It's there
So
today.
By not showing it on the site plan, the intent was to close it? It just wasn't specified in the amendment, in the SPUD? So it's not
The
shown.
existing driveway would be right about where my cursor is, I think,
Yep.
on the screen. And of course, with the site plan that was considered the 2010 plan, there was no need for that driveway to be there because they're putting a building there.
Putting a building.
So, This original site plan is pretty hard for us to make out. Obviously, the driveway off of 23rd is not anticipated as part of that. Can you make out where the drive-through was supposed to be?
Well, there was no driveway.
There wasn't one planned at that time.
Okay.
The uses in the approved SPUD allow for it.
Right.
It just
That and
wasn't
just about
provided.
everything else.
This was a site schematic plan. PUDs and SPUDs are more specific than PUDs, but still have some flexibility built into them as projects change, users change over time.
So if we're considering the amendment today, is there an associated site plan that we're voting on today? Because it says as shown on the attached site plan, so what's...
This site plan would go with the SPUD, but it's only for the purposes of getting the SPUD approved. Once the SPUD is approved, a CA will come back before the UDC for you to address site-specific issues, architecture, signage, so on and so forth.
Which we're going to give you a preview of today.
Okay, but that original site plan stays attached with it, with this amendment?
No, it would be replaced with this site plan.
Okay, and that's a separate, okay. Well, I'm okay with it, with all that understood.
Any other questions, comments? I think
Thank
we're
you.
ready for that now.
I'd like to make a motion to make a recommendation to the Planning Commission to approve the proposed amendment to SPUD 560 as submitted.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
Thank you.
Moving on, but staying on the same case, we're going into a preview of the design that's being proposed for this building. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
my understanding. I'm going to introduce Will Solons, who's the architect on the project, and let him walk through architectural aspects of it.
The intent was just to capture this corner, but at the same time, not with something brand new, something that looks like it's always been there. So with that in mind, taking cues from the surrounding buildings, total masonry, veneer, cast stone elements, different coursing elements of the building, to hopefully accentuate that area, but at the same time also making it look like it's always been there. Taking the aspect of placement of the building and promoting the public way, specifically the sidewalk, the pedestrian walks, that streetscape. That was the prime example of, or the prime focus on this building location. With the use of this corner, just kind of walking around the building, as you see this rendering right now at the present time, our main focal point is the corner. Bringing in some life and color with planter at the grade level, and then coming up the building and looking at the various storefronts. Well, they mimic various storefronts that are down throughout the 23rd Street up east and west. The linear lines, kind of the second nature of that area, of that type of architecture that is going on. This building does, just kind of regroup, this building does have 3 areas in it, 3 suites for various business, wherever those may be. And they all front either Hudson and or 23rd and have access actually from the north as well. From a very broad overview, this is kind of the gist of it, with accessible additional parking in the north lot as well for this use. Excuse me, from a part, forgive me, I'm very nervous. From a very broad perspective, this is kind of the nature of this project. If there are any questions, comments, concerns with what you're looking at right this moment.
I do want to point out that this illustrative rendering does show a couple of murals here on the west elevation. Those are subject to additional review through the Arts Commission and would come at a later date after any approval of the CA for the building itself. And this view also does give you a sense of what the building would look like and what that gap would look like between the existing building here with the green roof. And this is the easterly suite right here past that lamppost. And this section of wall right here is that false front that people would drive through to access to the drive-through window at the rear of this suite here on the end.
I have a question. Is the only reason that's being proposed is for the gap? Is if someone wanted a drive-through, but you don't have a tenant, once,
We have a prospective tenant, and that's as much as I can say.
okay, so it would be built that way if it was approved, or if they didn't need the drive-through and they wanted to put another building there, that would come back for further review.
I would think that if the tenant walked away from the project, they would probably still have an opportunity to fill that in with another building, or it might be a little narrow for a retail suite. I think it was like 18 feet,
It is right at 20 feet.
20 feet? Okay. I think that opportunity would be there, or they could market to another drive-through user.
Is the owner, developer of this space also the same owner as the green-roofed building next door?
Yes.
Okay.
Are we going to get the green mansard knocked off in this process?
Well, that's one of the things that's been discussed, looking to see what's underneath that green mansard, if there's anything that was existing of age of that building, and explore those options.
May I ask if there was any consideration to not demolishing the portion of the green building that is being demolished?
Tentatively, it was considered, but at the same time, seeing what the state of that portion of that building's in, it would not be applicable. I mean, it's in very dire need of demolishing.
So I was chatting, so you may have answered this question already. Sorry, that's
ahead.
what I do. So is there a discussion about upgrading the 23rd Street facade of the building with the green awning?
There's been discussions of seeing what is actually underneath that green roofing material. Hopefully, if our suspicions are correct, there's existing canopy that was originally attached to the building. But the only way we'll know that is we start pulling things off and really explore what's underneath there, if it can be rehabilitated or if we take cues from it and try to bring back that history.
Is the artwork painted on the brick, or is it applied to the brick?
It will be applied, the discussion has been applied to a board material. The reason for the banding or the coursing around those areas specifically, we've offset that coursing about 1 inch in design, and so that way we can apply a board product with a mural on it. So that way, if any graffiti or anything does happen to that, it can be easily repaired.
Thank you.
It's a good idea because it's also shop prepared, so it's got a little bit more control of the
Yes, ma'am.
process.
There was one other question about signage, and I actually thought that this had shown some of the signage, but it doesn't. I have seen some of the proposed signage, and generally, by and large, the signage is blade signs that are hung underneath these canopies, and at least as of yet, we haven't seen any signs that are shown up on the parapet, on the upper portion of this wall. And then as to Commissioner Guillory's question about people knowing that they should turn in this driveway to get to where they're going on the drive-through, I'm not sure that there is any signage that I've seen proposed in this location that would give anybody indication that there's a business to access by this hole in the wall. So that would be something that people will just have to get used to as they get familiar with the business being located there, I would imagine. And I think the sign that Mr. Anderson talked about not blocking the sidewalk would be probably placed on the facade of the wall here for people to see it as they drive through that facade.
As far as the traffic directional signs or knowing where you're going, one of the options, one of the things that we will be proposing next month is some signage on the band of the canopy itself that is actually overhanging this element, as well as also instructional signage either side of the opening. There's also a pedestrian opening right adjacent to the existing building to allow way from 23rd Street to that existing building, that opening at that point. So there are ways that we've helped control that at this point, or identified where you're going.
Any other questions? Comments?
I got a question. On the site plan, just kind of inquiring, is the handicap parking required back there for this, in this area?
For the use of the building, I would always have accessible parking directly adjacent to, or as close to an entry as possible.
Because there is a thought even on the drive in that somehow it could be kind of moved in a way where it could provide the buildings to maybe move even back a little bit further, and then the handicap parking could be potentially provided in the parking lot behind it, just because there are handicap ramps, or there are ADA ramps, and I think accessibility could still be done, because I don't think parking is technically required for this development, but it probably is recommended likely.
There's definitely leniency from the parking requirements. However, having an accessible space in the lot to the north, to me, from my perspective, would kind of pose a hazard for that person crossing the alley and then continuing on to the building itself.
Gotcha. As is, they already are technically crossing a drive zone for the drive-through.
Definitely. I mean, it's marked, it's highlighted. I agree with the hazard aspect of where you're coming from. At that point in time, we've controlled, it has been controlled. It's very narrow, so that vehicle traffic has slowed to a crawl within that drive lane.
I was just trying to say it's like a design consideration, something to think about.
Sure,
not saying
very
it
much so.
has to be done that way, just a
No,
possibility.
definitely take another look at it, for sure.
Other comments, questions? Anything else that anyone from the audience would like to add? Okay, well, this was for information purposes, so there is no action required by us, correct?
Just the feedback that the commission wants to provide the applicant, yeah.
All right, last chance, anyone? Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we move on to the next communication, this isn't necessarily for the applicant, it's more for just a comment for internal purposes. This SPUD was approved 7 years ago with no sunset provision in it that I could find at all, and outlined 25 different uses for the property that, as far as I can tell, the SPUD will go on in perpetuity. 7 years, 23rd Street has changed a lot in those last 7 years, and the goals and what's possible along 23rd Street has changed quite a bit. I would say for internal purposes, it might be something to take into consideration that sunset provisions, not totally open-ended SPUDs, something that would have some sort of a reasonable sunset provision might be worth considering.
I would have to research that because we have looked at that before and have found that we are not able to do those things in zoning ordinances, so.
Okay. Even if no permit, even if no action is taken within X period of time, still can't be sunsetted?
That's my recollection, but I would, I could look at that again.
Okay. That was just Personal opinion, I guess. Let's move on to the next communication, which is 2515 North Classen.
This is just the administrative approval report. We have 3 cases that were administratively approved since your last meeting. One is a changing of the size of a sign on a use for the Trinity Baptist Church up on North Classen. We have a revision of building materials for a trash enclosure. That's for the Jimmy John's that was approved a while back out on Northwest 23rd. And then you may remember we did approve an addition to the building at the southeast corner of Northwest 16th in Indiana. I think that was done administratively, but they've come back and asked that the size of the addition be increased, and we also made that change administratively as well.
Okay. Anything else? Any questions? You can just keep moving on, Michael, if you want.
Okay, then the Planning Commission report, wanted to update the UDC that the item that we lost our quorum on at the last meeting did go before the Planning Commission on February 9th, and it was approved for the spud that straddled the boundary in the Plaza District at Blackwell during Northwest 15th.
Were there any changes made to it from what we saw?
The setback was changed.
Right.
And I
They
think there was
increased
something else.
the setback on the side of the building facing Northwest 15th to require a minimum of a 5-foot setback on that side of the building.
Okay. Okay. That takes us through all communications. Comments from Planning Department staff?
Yeah, I have 2 questions for the commission that I'm trying to remember to ask every commission. One, it's been suggested that we incorporate a process change for the election of chair and vice chair, which we just did recently. That suggestion is that every year we could, like next year, we could just do an election for vice chair, and the current vice chair would move up to chair. And then the following year, just elect a vice chair, and the former vice chair would move up, just to keep everybody's, we always encourage, staff always encourages, a change in the chair and vice chair. There are pros and cons. I think one pro is it removes some of the dilemma facing everybody when it comes to nominations and elections time. So one question is, what do you think that would work for Urban Design Commission? Do you think it should be, we could formalize it in the bylaws. We could also just adopt it as practice, start practicing it on the next election time.
Would that be an annual change of the chair?
Yes.
It seems like George did a really nice job when he was the chair. I mean, does it?
Oh, I thought
Not myself. Oklahoma George, not Puerto Rican George. And I'm just curious, I mean, I thought he ran things really well. I'm not trying to keep anybody here
I'm
permanently.
not disagreeing.
But if there's an opportunity for somebody that wants to stay, would that preclude them from staying if we have this mechanism in place?
If it was formalized in the bylaws, yes.
It could be simply
George McQuestion, for everyone who's watching, George did a fantastic job as chair, but I know he did not want to keep being reelected chair.
Well, and that brings up the point.
So that's part of, yes, he was good at it, he was glad to serve, but he was having a real hard time getting
Well,
out of it.
my comment was just that maybe 1 year's not enough.
Or maybe do it on a
every year, because it seems like it takes time to get to a point of comfort, and you just get there and it's time to...
I would tend to agree with that comment, but also from a different point of view. We have a lot of new faces on the commission that if we're going to rotate every year, it puts people in the chair position potentially pretty quickly after they've just gotten on the commission. I agree completely, too, that George did a fantastic job. Your point, though, he kept doing it because no one would volunteer to take his place. So if we do this, it will force people to, which might not be a bad thing, I don't know.
And force people to prepare and to, watch. Every year we ask everyone, everyone here needs to be prepared, because it has happened on this committee that neither one of you were here. Ben, you chaired one in the last year, I think. Somehow and Lee did. Yeah, Lee did too. So we ask everyone to be prepared and to, pay attention to how the chair is running the meeting so that, and I understand there is something to be said about natural talents and aptitudes, and I understand that, but
I would like to suggest that we maybe make it an informal idea, but not formalize it, because I think being forced into it might put someone into a position they really can't be in because of needing to be absent frequently, or even have a case in front of, if you're Brian Fitzsimmons, he couldn't have been the chair because he had too many cases that were in front of us.
I like the idea of having it brought up, hey, this person's been on 1 year or 2 year. But it does seem like it would take about a year to kind of get into the swing of things. And even, today you're, not to be critical of your first time, but you've gotten the hang of this. Things go by a whole lot,
Yeah, it's a learning curve for sure, so.
So to make it like an informal policy.
just make it a practice, not embedded anywhere.
That we do it every other year or so, depending on if you can find somebody to take the.
Okay, other question was to take everyone's temperature. I'm not saying we are doing this, I just want to get a read on if commission members would be interested in receiving their packets on iPads, not on paper.
You would deliver an iPad to them?
Well, you would be given an iPad as part of your service, and we would send you something to download. Do I?
I can see pros and cons. For instance, today's case with the 2010 site plan that was really hard to see on a photocopy. An iPad, you could expand it, you could view it, you could zoom in better. I think some of that would be really beneficial. I am kind of a Luddite in a lot of ways and like to, make notes on the hard copy. So I could go either way.
Would it save the money, the city money?
We are always looking for ways to reduce our printing costs.
Well, mailing costs too, I would assume.
And mailing.
Well, so.
But I believe strongly, it needs to be what's the
iPads.
most usable. The idea, we want to provide it in the most usable form for you. Like, I'm a paper person. I'm not giving up my paper back.
You can always print your own.
You could print it. That being said, I always keep all of my old ones, and I'm telling you, this is starting to really take up a lot of filing space.
They do.
Yeah, all of this, if you're not aware, all of these things live online forever. So unless there's just a specific note you have, you don't need to keep your hard copies because you can always go back.
Like I said, I am a Luddite.
To an address.
So would it save the city money if we did that?
I don't know. I've been asked to poll the committees on if they would use an iPad.
You want a show of hands?
Instead of paper.
Could it be like you request to have it sent to you if you want it?
Paper or?
We can always download it, actually.
Like it could be more like a.
Oh, no, it's all or nothing. We can't manage individually. We just wouldn't be able to.
I kind of like the idea
If
of
the
being able
answer
to
is
zoom
paper,
in.
the answer is paper. If the answer is yes, I want it,
I think
I think it'd be helpful to have.
If the sustainability office or the city of Oklahoma City decided that all commissions and committees should have
No, they haven't
digital
decided that.
copies, but I think that it would be a smart idea, and it would make a statement. I like paper myself, but it doesn't mean that I can't print it out myself.
And I don't think anyone should, I personally don't believe committee members should be offering to print it themselves, because sometimes the packets get pretty big.
Well,
And they're
especially
full
with the
color,
drawings
and they're
and
11 by
things.
17. But anyway, I just wanted to ask the
Don't the
question.
applicants provide color 11 by 17s, or?
If they are over 10 pages or so, we ask them to provide color copies in duplicate. If it's just a few, we don't worry about it.
It's the staff collating, packaging, mailing,
Right.
so it's staff time as well.
Yeah, and part of what I'm asking, like, if you guys use paper and like paper, that's fine, it's not worth any savings, but we're always being asked to consider ways.
I don't know that I would use my Surface, to be honest, because I can mark on that. The iPads are for my kids. So,
Yeah, you won't be able to download games on your city-issued iPads.
I could bring it up now. I like the idea of getting rid of the paper if we could, but we can do that now. We can see them online. Well,
We could do that now if everybody here wanted to work off their own iPad. We could definitely provide you with a PDF, or you can access the platform. When Michael and Paula are clicking through the cases, they're clicking off of Sire. Oh, sometimes you are. Sometimes.
It's also a lot easier to access than it used to be. I think you've made improvements. Thank you.
Yeah.
It sounds like we're pretty
Sounds like there's
flexible, whatever's going to be best
flexible,
for...
no consensus either way.
April is Earth Day month. We should have a month of no printed copies, and we bring our laptop, and everybody,
Yeah, that's an idea.
1 month of
1 month a
paper-free
year.
meeting. How about that?
See how it works?
Yeah.
Let's see how it works. Just a trial run,
That's a great.
I grew up in California.
They don't get paper in California. Okay, that was all my questions.
Any other staff comments? Commission member comments? All right, our next meeting is March 22nd. Thank you.